Grand greetings.
Grand greetings.
Susan Smallwood, and I am the Grand Caviar Queen. Today is part 2 of Caviar and Convo, Ooh La La, brought to you by Le Grande Caviar. Ooh La La.
Ooh la la.
I am back here at Sage Light Integrative Wellness in Columbia, Maryland with Dr. Renee McSwain, Doctor of Oriental Medicine and Acupuncturist. Welcome again, darling.
Thank you.
Thank you. So today's topic is healing trauma from the cellular level.
Absolutely.
But first, let me do an educational piece about Le Grande Caviar. This is Royal Osetra Caviar, which comes from the Osetra sturgeon. And Le Grande Caviar is rich in peptides, which reduces inflammation and promotes the immune system. Also activates the enzymes, which lengthens the telomeres to delay the aging process. Ooh la la. And also boosts collagen production, which keeps our skin youthful and firm. Last but not least, it's also an aphrodisiac. Ooh la 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 la. So what I'm about to do is, I'm not gonna do a caviar, but I'm just gonna indulge in the Le Grande Caviar right from this Michael Aram designer spoon made of bone. Caviar can only be served from mother of pearl spoon, bone, wood, or real gold. Anything from Mother Nature, not metal that will taint the taste of the caviar. So here we go. And then Dr. McSwain will explain how to heal trauma from the cellular level.
Absolutely. Woo. Let me put my readers on. Took a little notes this time so I can stay on task. So we kind of talked about last time the components of epigenetics and how trauma can get infused into the DNA expression. And how that DNA expression then starts to inform our behaviors, our actions, the way we think about life. And that then gets passed on through the genetics and bloodline. So a lot of us are dealing with trauma as a result of something that has happened in the genetic line years ago, many generations ago. And because of lack of access to resources, not understanding the process of trauma and how trauma affects most, especially I would say in our, trauma is universal, and I would say in a lot of our disenfranchised communities, we don't have access to tools and resources to try to process what's happening. We're taught to just, strap it up, just move on, just, keep going. And that we really just learn to be in survival mode most of the time. So there's, such a now push for wellness and mindfulness and mental health. And all of these new and old modalities are coming to surface because people have found that just kind of medicating, whether it's self-medication or if it's any other type of medication alone, does not help or heal the trauma. Right?
That's correct.
So trauma is usually develops from experiences from childhood. Again, these are usually traumas that have carried on through the bloodline. So if we experience these trauma, we have a predisposition coming into life due to the epigenetic part of it. But we also then are shaped, that predisposition then starts to express due to our environment.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So if we grew up with parents that they too have the trauma codes, right, that's passed into their DNA, then the environment will then foster that trauma to perpetuate, right? So we usually start to get tainted or lean towards a particular way or have even consciousness of the trauma, usually in childhood. 0 to 7 is the formative years, right? Most people start to remember somewhat of a memory around 5. So in Chinese medicine lens, we call it a causative factor, right? So it's either a constitutional or a causative factor. Either way, it's something happened within your development that was an event, and it shaped how you looked at the world from there on.
That's correct.
Right? So when trauma happens, the biochemistry of the brain starts to change, right? And basically we start to form new neural pathways in order for us to process that trauma, right? So in health, people would function from the frontal part of the brain, the frontal lobe of the brain. And this is responsible for the executive functioning, it's responsible for the cognition, it's responsible for decision making, for being logical, rational, reasonable, being able to see things from a realistic point of view and then take action, right? So in health, we would be able to have clear thoughts, cognitive realities. We would be able to execute, make decisions about life, trust in the process, and be able to go forth. But what happens in trauma is that the midbrain starts to get activated. And the midbrain is responsible for our emotional center and how we record events that happen emotionally. So the midbrain is connected to the hippocampus, to the amygdala, and it is this process of then activating this survival mechanism. So because of the trauma, that part of the brain starts to get super activated. Okay.
Now, where's the midbrain?
Pretty much like on the inside, in the middle, kind of in the middle of the brain.
Okay, gotcha. Just like she said, midbrain.
Middle of the brain.
In the middle of the brain.
Of the brain, right? And so those are recording of emotional experiences, and it's our emotional center, right? And so that will then start to activate this survival mechanism of now I'm looking at life from a place that I have to survive, right? So then that activates the fight or flight response, fight, flight, or fright, or like freeze response in life. And so then we start to develop these patterns and ways of being. So some of the ways that we can understand that we have some type of PTSD or we have suffered some type of trauma is through symptoms, right? And these symptoms could be negative thinking, right? Rumination, not feeling safe within our body or in our environment, right? This kind of hyper vigilance of like not, always looking at an environment of saying what's going to attack me, right? Feeling of doom or dread, even when things are going well, right? The person's like, oh, the other shoe's going to drop. Something's going to happen.
Like a pessimist.
Yeah, right. And it could be, it doesn't necessarily always have to be a negative Nancy, and it could, they may not even express it, right? They may not even know that that's what they're feeling, but there's something on the inside that's saying, this is too good to be true, right?
Yeah, so it's like self-sabotaging.
Exactly, and then they can do that sabotaging effect where
because they're attracting that energy.
Exactly, right, and they will start to then make actions based on that, right?
Right.
And then this emotional dysregulation, and so that means that they're kind of up and down the scale emotionally of how they feel. There's not kind of a smooth flow of their emotions, right? So over a prolonged period of time, with that, if that is not resolved and processed, then it starts to form a personality. That trauma forms a personality, which is the ego. So the ego gets kind of like activated from that point of trauma, and then it starts to form a personality or a way or coping mechanisms in order to deal with the world from this now new viewpoint, right? So that can be self-abandonment, toxic shame, right? The harsh inner critic, social anxiety is another one. I have my notes, and like emotional flashbacks. So these are kind of symptoms that we can look at and see to say, okay, we are still, the trauma of whatever, it could have happened 20, 30 years ago, but it's still very much alive in our system, in our consciousness today.
Absolutely.
Right? So again, that is the emotional, the hyper alertness, very quick to react. This could be a person that can go to 0 to 60, with split second, right? And other people around like, what happened? This could be the fight or flight or the freeze techniques, and then this other coping mechanisms like people pleasing, overcompensating, right? Being too nice, right?
Oh, I can definitely relate to that.
So I don't know if there's one person in the world that doesn't have some component of this.
Absolutely.
Right? We come into a world that is a traumatizing experience, and it is a traumatizing world. There are some definitely beautiful elements of the world, but it is very much set up to not necessarily foster this healthy expression of ourselves, right? It is a traumatizing environment. So when people come to me and they're, they may come to me for various reasons: knee pain, back pain, headaches, whatever the case may be. Sometimes it's anxiety. What is the first rule of thumb that I normally do with people? And that is first being able to stabilize the body. The body is is the densest version of us being expressed into form and matter and into reality. And because the body holds somatically the trauma that we have experienced through our lifetime, and even what has passed through the DNA line, before we can get to the mental scape, we first have to regulate the body. And it's kind of like a different way of approach, because a lot of people is like, oh, the world is thought, everything is what you think. Absolutely, 100%. However, if you are doing behaviors that are causing infliction on the body, right, and keeping the body in this constant state of stress, then you're not going to be able to have clear cognition to even change your mental landscape to do something different.
Right.
So when people first come in, I work on, the first 3 things I do is do clearings on people.
And how do you do the clearings?
The clearings are done through acupuncture. So, so in the 5-element approach that we use, 5-element acupuncture, basically it was designed to really take a look at the psycho-emotional aspect of a person. And so the first 3 treatments that I do on most everybody are clearings. And so I explain it to people in analogy of saying, if you were a garden, before I can plant anything in the garden, I have to do what?
Pull the weeds.
Exactly. So I got to pull the weeds out. I got to turn the soil over, right? I want to check the porosity of the soil. I want to make sure if it needs any minerals, any substances, anything that's going to help foster growth. Clear the landscape. And so the clearings are designed just for that, right? To clear the landscape, clear the surface debris, right? So that now I can get a clear shot of what's happening within you, right? The person.
And you can get that answer from 3 sessions of acupuncture.
Absolutely.
Isn't that amazing?
Absolutely. Yeah. It gives me a clear shot of like who you are, and not necessarily starts to let me understand the authentic person versus the personality that has developed, the conditioned personality. Now that doesn't mean you're healed, right? It's like, oh, I'm done, right?
Yes.
Right, because this is a process. This is a journey, right? But it does allow me to start to see the true person, because there is a true authentic person that is different from the conditioned response or the conditioned personality that's formed due to trauma.
Absolutely.
Right? So with that, I put here the process of healing is remembering the true authentic self, right? Not the conditioned version of ourselves. And to also unlearn conditioned behaviors.
Yes.
Right? So first you got to do is make a commitment to yourself.
That's true.
That's number one, because I can stick 1,000,000 needles in people, and if you're not really connected and committed to your healing, it won't do anything. And acupuncture is a synergistic, energetic medicine, right? So it works with your energy, it works with your chi, and starts to circulate your chi, which then influences your blood and substances to start to then clear out anything that has been a blockage in your life, right?
Okay.
So, and then in the healing process is about integrating the conscious and the subconscious. So the conscious is, what your cognitive, what you do on a daily. Your subconscious is actually your reactionary patterns, right? So you're starting to fuse these two together, right? To let it have a relationship with one another, right? So acupuncture, herbal therapy, somatic release, EMDR, Reiki, lymphatic massage, and mineral supplements, right, are all ways that you can help to foster this within you. Like you can go and seek these therapies. You can do lymphatic massage yourself. There's like 1,000,000 YouTube videos of doctors that show how to do lymphatic massage, gua sha, those type of treatments, even treating the fascia, like taking a tool and like going into and like really breaking up, right? These, what we call, some people call it cellulite, but it's really the fascia, that actually connects all.
It's like a net.
It's a net that has over muscle systems and things like that. So all those things hold trauma, right? Because again, it stores in the body. It has to take finance. If you choose not to deal with it in an emotional sense, right, to confront it, you're still financing it somewhere, and usually it's in the body, right? So acupuncture is designed to reset the autonomic nervous system, right? And this is the system that regulates heartbeat, blood pressure, our breathing, all of sexual functions, all those things. And so because it's set to reset that, it gives an opportunity for then the person to start to see things from a different point of view, right? And how it resets it because it works. When I put in those points, right, we have about 360 points that we work with on a regular, and then there's all these other extra points, right? Those points are connected to meridian systems, and these meridians you can kind of look at them as like rivers or streams within the body, right? And they're connected to our organs and connected to the functionality of the organ, which is the organ system. And so when I am putting different points into a person, I'm basically asking the chi to go in and to do a particular function within that organ system. That might be at distress, stagnation, there may be a deficiency there, whatever the case, whatever's showing up on the person, right? So it allows a person to get very present in their life and to start to connect to their body, their mind, and spirit. Now these three layers of ourselves start to talk to each other again.
So communicating.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So again, first thing is doing the clearings, but then also teaching people how to live in harmony of nature.
Yes.
So I think a lot of times we feel like we are outside of nature, right? So we're in the fall, right? We're the end of summer, but technically, according to a Chinese medicine lens, we're actually in the fall. We can even see the leaves coming down off the trees. So what does that mean? What does that mean for us, right? Because what's happening in nature, we're no different than the tree outside, right? We are connected to nature whether we recognize it or not. So most of the time people will start to feel tired. They may want to turn in a bit early. They may not have the same rambunctiousness or energy level, right? And they're like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with me. Now let me drink 45 more cups of coffee, or, do some type of other stimulant. And it's really because your biological functions is responding to nature, right? So in Chinese medicine, it's a beautiful medicine, and the core of it is Taoist based. So it's about returning to nature, which is returning back into ourselves.
Okay.
Right? So we call it the 5 elements, which is also called the 5 phases, which in Chinese tongue is the Wu Wei. Right? This is the movement of cycles. Right? And so the first year that I work with people, I'm really instituting or helping them to remember the nature within them, within themselves, and also to start to then monitor their ways of being, their actions, their activity, their food, like lifestyle elements, right? In this Wu Wei. So, for
and
instance,
how do you spell Wu? Is it W-U?
W-U, and then W-E-I, which is the 5 phases.
Got it.
And actually, there's I don't know if they can see it, but you can see here, this is the 5 element chart, and it explains a bit on what the elementals mean. So we're in the fall season on the Western Hemisphere. So what does that mean? So fall is connected to metal, the metal element.
Okay.
It is also connected to the organ systems of the lung and the colon. It's also connected to the emotion of grief. So grief usually, for a lot of people, is a scary emotion to be. It's often considered unpleasant, but it's actually very much in nature, and it is part of our cycle, right? So we look at grief from a healthy standpoint. Looking to nature is key. So what is happening on the outside, right? The leaves are starting to turn, right? They're turning these brilliant colors, and eventually they will detach from the tree and to go into the ground, and from there they are then recycled, right? They are used in their energy, right, through their decaying process to then ferment and fertilize the ground, the soil, right? Why? Because it helps to preserve the nutrients of the soil, right? So that in the spring there's enough nutrients for the new life to spring up. Right? So what does that mean? If we look at the healthy expression of what's happening outside, what does that mean for us? So that means that what are things, patterns, ways of being, conditions, thoughts, paradigms, relationships, whatever that case may be, that are no longer serving us? Right? You have now the seasonal support to start the process of detaching. That's the true grief of the detach, right? This could be situations, old ways of being. 20 years ago, I was hot and single, and now I'm, I don't feel that way. Whatever it is, right? That's being a block of you being present to the now.
Okay, so getting rid of attachment from the past.
Or ways of being.
Gotcha.
Right, that no longer serve. They could be present in your life, right? But they're not serving you anymore. You don't feel good about it. It's nothing that's part of that attachment, that connection that's actually elevating you. Right? So those things can start to be discarded. Right? And when I say discard, it's discard with love, right? Did you learn everything out of that experience, that connection that you need to? Did you gain the wisdom? So now you can properly let that go, right? Why do we want to let go? Because then we can then activate the higher realms of the metal, right, of the inspiration. We've created space, right, to now be in a new inspired version of ourselves.
Yes.
Right? So some of the things that we can do to facilitate that, right, is actually eating things that are local, that grows locally, right? So these, get the squashes and the shards and the rhubarbs and, the root vegetables. All those things are like coming up to full bloom during this time, the harvest of that. So, going to a farm stand, buying those vegetables, buying those things that are seasonally, where we are, right? Those things, those nutrients that we're putting in our body, right, are part of us participating in nature.
Yes.
Right? And so we start with that. So it's a very simple process. I think people feel like they want to hit some button and then it's like, whew,
Yeah.
done, healing done, complete, right? And most people are not ready by far for healing. You have to build up to it. And so you build up to it by then actually getting the body in alignment, because you want constitutionally for yourself to be strong. So that means lifestyle, going to bed early, sleep hygiene, right? Getting off devices, right? At least an hour before bed, eating at a regular time, right? Having more than, half a meal a day, right? And stop going into a drive-through and actually start to cook for yourself, whatever that might mean, right? Being able to really nurture and cater to yourself, right? Then starting these mindful practices like meditation, walking in nature. I love walking, in nature and seeing the seasons change, right? Not with phones or anything or distracted. Sometimes I may listen to something, but other times I want to hear nature. I want to interact with nature, right? Because it's returning back to myself when I do that, right? So being able to be in participation with what's happening in nature. Once we start to do that, right, we start to then discover other aspects of ourselves that we forgot about. Because when we're children, kids go outside, they play. Well, they used to,
We're in a whole new world.
But they can easily play. They can be a part of nature. They can, make a game out of anything. There's a playfulness and a joy of interacting with nature. And then we're tricked out of that brilliance as we start to grow up, as we start to adult, as we start to experience trauma. So it really is returning back to this very pure sense of ourselves. And that's when we start to discover who we are, not the conditioned way of being, right? So starting on that body level, right, of like really regulating, like people say, oh, eat healthy so you can lose weight. No, it's really part of you nurturing yourself so that you can still have the ability to start to heal. Right? Healing your gut, like taking the prebiotics, the probiotics, all those things are part of your healing process, right? The gut is the second brain, right? So if you want cognition and your gut is all messed up, then what are you doing?
Which reminds me, I got to order my acidophilus.
Right? And then you can start to move on into these emotional base, right? And then understand how the emotions show up in nature, how it shows up in health, right? I gave the example of grief and how it shows up in nature so that we have a guide, right, of how do we deal with the emotional experience within ourselves. Because what we've only seen is the pathology of the energetic that's labeled as a particular emotion. Chinese medicine, there's no good and bad emotion. It's just frequency. It's just vibration.
Energy.
That's it. There's no good and bad. There's no, these emotions are good. No.
Right.
Because grief is connected to autumn. Most people would say that would be a bad emotion, but it's actually quite beautiful. Because of grief, we get the crystallization of the experience of the connection. Right? These are the gemstones and the crystals and all those things that we buy and pay thousands of dollars for and all that because of the energy. It's recording the experience of the connection. And this is the wisdom that we're taking with us. That's grief. Right? That's going out onto the mountaintop and looking at the horizon and being in awe, right, of the everything, connected to everything, and being inspired, right, to understand that we are part of this bigger whole, right? That's grief, right? It's not necessarily the, the longing or, this complete disconnect, right? In ancient societies, even if a person transitioned, right, they just became ether. You still connected to them, right? It wasn't a complete loss, right? The remembrance of that experience, right, of you being connected to them is what the grief was, the wisdom of the grief. That was the crystal, right? So we have to look at these things in a healthy way, in a healthy expression of it, so that we can understand what is pathology and what is health. And then we can start to determine that within ourselves, right?
Wow. Are y'all comprehending? This is so deep. We're diving deep with Dr. McSwain.
Yes. So those are some things: spending time in nature, sleep hygiene, minimizing alcohol, caffeine. I know people love it, but it is a mineral robber.
Is it?
Yes, it taxes your kidney chi.
Oh, wow.
Your kidneys are connected to your, not only just your purification system in your body, but it's connected to your energy center. It is the facilitator of your ancestry, right?
Wow, and I drink coffee every morning.
Well, a cup a day isn't a bad thing, depending on what that cup size. If it's like I'm drinking 24 ounces, then
Okay.
right? But if you're, some people, they like, yeah, I drink about 3 or 4 cups a day. That's too much.
Okay.
But small amounts of it is not bad.
Okay.
Right? Everything in moderation, because Chinese medicine is all about the balance of it, right? So excessive amount of alcohol, caffeine, all those things can then start to rob you, right, of your chi, of your energy. So doing things like that, eating in the season, eating more alkaline. So I like to mix a combination of Chinese dietary therapy, right, which then puts foods in a kind of a group or category based on the elementals, right? So things elementally that we can eat now, since we're in the fall, are more pungent foods. So these are things are a little bit more spicy, right? Like Indian cuisine and things that have a good flavorful spice, right, are really good this time of year. It helps the immune system, right, because it helps to bring the yang, the heat to the body and starts to activate the immune system, right? But it also is good in order for us to start to clear out, right? Give clarity what we want to increase in our life, right? The good things that we want to increase in our life. So I like to mix Chinese dietary therapy with actually the blood type diet, which is old school. Dr. Diamo wrote a book like in the 70s called the blood type diet, or the blood-based diet, and it's actually now an app you can download.
Oh, wow.
And so basically he's done extensive research about the different blood groups and their origin, and what was happening within their origin story, like what type of environment do they live in, were they accustomed to eating, right? And so that information informs our biological makeup now.
Oh, wow.
Just because we have modern conveniences and we can get papaya in December, right, doesn't necessarily mean that's what we should be consuming.
Oh, wow.
Right? So I like to combine the both of like some of the dietary regulations for Chinese medicine, like don't eat a lot of cold and damp food, don't drink things that are icy cold, right, because it damages the spleen, and spleen is responsible for the quality of our blood, but the transportation of our fluids, all of that. So if you ever notice, like if you eat and you get bloated, that means your spleen has been impaired.
Oh, that's what that means?
Yeah. Because it's not transmuting the nutrients from your food and drink properly, right? And those nutrients then start to go and activate throughout the body, but it also helps the quality of the blood. Okay. So I'd like to combine those two different systems of eating. And again, it's all about the moderation. I'm not a big fan of like, you have to eat paleo, you have to be a vegan, you have to, it really is based on what feels good in your body, right? And so that's part of the education process of bringing people back into awareness presently in their bodies, starting there, right? So some herbal remedies, obviously if you have more complex issues, see a herbalist. Like, I can't tell you the amount of training I went through to be a herbalist, and the complexity of the
Herbal tea.
right? And so I you know, I don't mind people getting herbal remedies online, but also you have to understand the dynamics of the herb. So if you're having like, you know, different conditions and things like that, you know, going to someone that's trained herbally to be able to get a remedy is the best thing to do. But if for more wellness type of things that you can do, I strongly recommend for everybody blood purifiers, because again, like I said before in the last video, trauma stores in the blood.
Well, so what type of blood purifier?
So there are beautiful herbs out there that you can drink as a herbal tea, a remedy. Nettle, burdock root, dandelion, like the dandelion that grows up out of the ground. Yeah.
So the dandelion root is also a diuretic.
Yes, it is. And that diuretic helps to drain what we call heat out of the blood.
Okay.
Right? Because trauma will start to stagnate the blood, and it will start to cause what we call heat in the blood. And so those diuretics help to like drain that out by using the bladder system to get out the heat out of the body.
Okay.
Right? So burdock root, dandelion, kelp, beautiful, has 108 nutrients. Everyone should be doing some type of sea moss or kelp or things like that, because nutrient base is very, you know, just packed with nutrients. Nettle, beetroots are phenomenal, has the nitric oxide, right? It's going to help to oxygenate the blood, right? So it's now opening up the capillaries, opening up the vessels so that you can get more oxygen in the blood. Pounded arco, bitter melon, astragalus, dragon's blood, excellent. Red clover, licorice, dongwei. Dongwei is probably one of the most well used GYN herbs, especially for women, because it helps to nourish the blood and regulate the blood. DONGQUAI, Dongwei. And you can get that, I mean, they sell it at Mom's, Whole Foods, Amazon. Yeah, it's very well known. Red raspberry root or leaf is really good for women, no matter what stage of life they're in, whether it's, you know, teenage, fertility, postmenopausal, perimenopausal, because it helps to strengthen the uterus, which is important. And even if they don't have a uterus anymore, it's still really good to help to build the blood and nourish. So those are things herbally you can do. And then lastly, always recommend going to a holistic provider, whether it be an acupuncturist, whether it be a functional medicine doctor, a holistic provider, naturopathic doctor, and also getting a panel of your minerals. So understanding if there are any mineral deficiencies in the body. Most people are vitamin D deficient by nature, which will severely affect your sleep and your immune system, whole host of things. And so most people would take, you know, some type of vitamin supplement, things like that. I'm a big advocate of getting out in nature and getting some sun on you. But, you know, depending on lifestyle wise. But if there are other deficiencies in the body, you know, being able to identify them and then to also get supplementations for that to help to either through supplementations, or I'm a big fan of doing it through diet. But being able to have it on paper, lab work, to say these are where the deficiencies are, because that would help with the functions of how your body feels as well as how your brain is operating, right? Being in nature, we talked about that. Cultivation practices, qigong, tai chi, martial arts, yoga, all those things are part of like cultivating this energy within ourselves, right? This very subtle energy, cultivating our chi. And it also helps us to get in touch with how the flow of the chi is in our body, right? So like in yoga, there are, you know, hip openers, right? And a lot of us hold trauma in our pelvic region, right? And so, I mean, I personally have experienced doing hip openers and just having somatic release, right? Crying, because letting go, it didn't have to be connected to something cognitively, right? It may come up, it may not, but it was a somatic release that happened just because I was able to then ease the hips open, right? And ease the pelvic floor open to release those things.
And somatic, the meaning is?
Somatic is this subtle body that, or subtle energy that is part of our mental, emotional body. So we're not just a physical vessel, we are energy, right? And we have all of these subtle bodies that are connected to our physical body. And so things get stored on a etheric or mental or emotional level, and then they start to then get denser and denser and denser until they then start to infuse into the blood and infuse into the DNA. So when we're releasing things, there's plenty of videos and things where people have somatic releases, right? They're like crying and flaying, their arms are flaying up and things like that, and that's releasing these things that where they've been stored in this energy, right?
Okay.
Even if we look at nature, again, I always go back to nature, right? So if the gazelle is being chased by the lion, and if the gazelle gets away, right, gets to safety, what is the first thing that the animal will do? If you watch like nature shows or whatever, what's the first thing that they normally do?
When the gazelle gets away?
Gets away.
Go hide.
Maybe, or what's the first, if they're in a safe place, they get away, let's just say they get up to a hill and the lion goes back and they're get away.
When they're safe?
When they're safe.
What's the first thing they do? Ooh, that stumped me. What is it? Oh, release.
That's a somatic release.
Oh,
they're releasing the trauma.
Gotcha.
Right? Because if you imagine in the animal kingdom, you can't go around, being in fight or flight or, stuck in a trauma that happened 20 years ago or even yesterday, because you might not survive today.
Okay.
Right? So animals do it naturally, where they are releasing the trauma out of their bodies, right? So that they don't have that reservation in life, and they can see clearly, right? So that they can understand what is danger and what is not danger, right? And they can have a clear thought process on whatever it is that they're doing in their daily life. Because we're human and we're so complex, right? We start to take that on, and then we don't have this release mechanisms of what happened, of clearing that out, and we're not taught that at all, by no means. So shaking it off is like a somatic release, and so that's very often what happen with people when they start to do this emotional purging, is that it sometimes is a very violent reaction to the release.
Wow.
So a short story, I was working with this gentleman years ago, an older gentleman. He was a Vietnam vet, severe PTSD. He was on the antidepressant concoction for a zillion years. Still having very violent dreams. He would wake up in the morning, the covers would be over here, things would be on the ceiling fan. Like he had no recollection of it, even remembering that. And so when I first met him, talking to him, he was still in the war.
Oh, wow.
He was still in the war. And it was just as real as it happened yesterday. And so working with him over time, doing acupuncture with him, we were starting to make really good strides and thriving and doing, and he was starting to wake up to being present to life, right? And so we got to a point, and I was like, you know what, I really think you can benefit from doing herbal medicine. And so I put him on a formula. It's called the Blood Mansion. And it basically, you use it pretty much for pain, especially in the chest region. People having, a lot of pain that kind of just stuck here. But you can also use it for blood clearing. And so when he started with the formula, within a couple of weeks, he started breaking out in huge psoriasis rashes.
Wow. What was that, a reaction?
It wasn't a reaction. Now, that would be the first thing to say, was it a reaction? So I'm doing my checklist to make sure that was the release of the trauma.
Oh, wow. So it manifested into lesions.
So they would come up, they would, sometimes last 12 hours and dry back up, and then it would come up in another place, and the same thing. And so what I would do was support him acupuncturally, helping to clear out this trauma. And I said, this is what was stored in you. This was the trauma in your blood. So in herbal medicine or any holistic therapy, it's not going to suppress. It's going to bring it up and out, right? And so it's going to use the outermost vessel, outermost way to do that. The skin is one of the largest organ systems. So oftentimes it will bring that up to kind of release it, to clear it. So this lasted for a couple weeks, on and off, and then eventually it starts to subside more and more and more. From that point, he was re-engaged in life, right? He was living in the basement of his ex-wife, you know. He was able to move, buy a big old house, right? Move to his hometown, surround himself with family, and be able to be present in life right now.
That's a beautiful story.
Right?
So there is hope and healing.
Absolutely.
And we can't heal what we don't reveal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So lastly, cultivation of your discerner. So this is in talking about your thought process, right? So really starting to cultivate understanding your thoughts and understanding what is your true authentic thought, right? And what is the thought of the false self or the ego. So this is, it'll kind of drive you crazy at first, but it's a constant question of, is this mine or is this not mine? Where did this come from? And then doing a backtrack of like where these thoughts are coming from and what they're rooted in, right? And when you're first starting this process, you don't have to do anything with it, because it's just about cultivating so that you could start to have this discerning quality of understanding what's yours and not yours, right? And so that's the first step of like saying, is this truly mine, or is this a conditioned way or a conditioned response, right? And then connect that to how it feels in your body, and where do you feel that thought in your body, right? If it feels like your chest is constricting, or is your back hurting, all those things of now connecting the body, mind, and spirit, right? This is to help you, aid you of connecting your thoughts and your emotions and start to gain mastery. Because your emotions are a beautiful expression and they're energy centers. And if you learn how to master them, right, then you can start to use them as energy to manifest. Right?
Mastery of oneself.
Absolutely. So part of that thought process will go into the inner child work. There are a slew of inner child journals, workbooks, podcasts, all those things that, you know, people can use and utilize as tools to help them. I like to personally make, when I was doing my inner child work and how I counsel other people, is I like to put my 5-year-old self as a screensaver. We're always on devices, so every time I went to my device, I would see the 5-year-old Renee, right? And I constantly connected to her, because there's that inner child, right? Is she's there still in the midst of the trauma, still there being neglected, still there needing the nourishment that was never received, right? So now the reparenting process is you actually going to the 5-year-old self or the 7-year-old self or the 3-year-old self and saying, I'm your parent now.
Yes, and loving.
And loving.
Yes.
And making the commitment to do that, not shoving them in the corner somewhere. Right. And that's a little bit further down the road. But the first thing is to actually stabilize the body, get yourself constitutionally, body-wise well, create a rhythm in yourself, right, and how you regulate yourself. And then you can start to have more energy to actually do the emotional work, because that emotional work is taxing, it's a process, it doesn't happen overnight, and it's a commitment. And so you need to be strong in order to do that.
It is a journey.
Absolutely.
A long journey.
It can be, absolutely.
It can be,
yeah.
but it's well worth it.
Absolutely, yeah. So remember, just stole the words, remember it's a journey, it's a process, there's no fast track with it. And if you constantly wake up and make the commitment to yourself in your healing journey, then it will happen, little by little.
I'm so grandly grateful for this beautiful segment of healing trauma from the cellular level, and I pray that the audience understands and gets it, and feel free to contact Dr. Renee McSwain here at Sage Light Integrative Wellness in Columbia, Maryland. And Dr. McSwain will also be at our Polo and Jazz Saturday, September 23rd with complimentary acupuncture and massages. Ooh la 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 la. So we'll see you all there, and live life grand every day, happy and healed. Susan Smallwood.
Thank you.
Have a grand day.